It's Thirsty Thursday. You're so thirsty, thirsty Thursday. Thirsty for knowledge, thirsty Thursday. Drink it up.
Welcome back to our January Get Organized series. Today is the Assistant Manager's Guide to Organizing Your Day. The role of an assistant manager is so unique because so much of what you do is defined by timelines and deadlines and by other people's schedules. Many of the tasks that you have to complete are required so that someone else can actually do their job as well. So it's important that we pay attention to our own timelines, but also to the timelines of others. If you haven't watched episode 1 of the Get Organized series, I want you to pause this video and go back and watch that video first, because it gives you a lot of the foundational information that you'll need to get you geared up and ready to organize your day. So, as I explained in episode 1, you'll need all of the tools that we talked about. Plus, at this point, you should have a good defined list of your daily tasks. The first thing that I want you to do is go through that outline of daily tasks and create a timeline. Maybe indicate which ones are time sensitive, because I know a lot of your work is. One of the first things that you'll want to do every single day when you come in is grab that checklist, just to make sure that you can check off the things as you complete them. It gives you an opportunity to feel a sense of accomplishment, but also a lot of times, even though our jobs might be routine in the tasks that we have to do, it's easy to forget things. So utilizing a checklist, even if you've been doing this for years and years, is super helpful to make sure that everything gets taken care of every day. In addition to that, if something happens to you and you're out sick, or maybe you're unavailable for several days, if you have that checklist handy, then someone else can step in easily and kind of follow your typical schedule. So what should your day look like? Well, first thing you should do is tie up any loose ends from the previous day. Perhaps you can't advance the date until these tasks are completed, or you have things that were pending that need to be completed so that someone else can move forward with the process. So tie up those loose ends first thing in the morning so that you can move on and start fresh. A large part of the assistant manager's role is communication. Communicating with residents, with team members, and even with our suppliers and vendors. So it's important that we set aside time for those communications. Make those calls one of your first things you do in the morning. So after you tie up those loose ends, start making those calls. So if you need to reconcile accounts so that you can make calls about delinquencies or even credits that people might have, then you want to do that in the morning so you can get those calls underway. If you need to follow up with suppliers and vendors about outstanding purchase orders or maybe invoices that you're awaiting, then you want to handle those processes so that you can make those calls in the morning. There's a couple of reasons you want to do this. Typically, those types of tasks require some good brain power for you to reconcile accounts and make sure things are in order, but also you want to get those calls in the morning because typically more people are going to be available in the morning hours. But also, you'll have a window of time in the afternoon that you'll set aside to make those follow-up calls. So anyone you couldn't reach in the morning, you can now make a follow-up call in the afternoon. It's important that you allow yourself this time and allow this of your residents, your suppliers, and even your coworkers. Give them time to receive your message, process the information, maybe collect the information you're requesting and get back to you. And if you do that first thing in the morning, they have all day to get back to you in the afternoon when you make that follow-up call. Because so much of your role is time sensitive, it's very important that you pay attention to your deadlines. And remember that your deadline may be your deadline, but someone else might have a follow-up deadline. Meaning, you might have to reconcile accounts and provide a delinquency report that your manager then has to review and make responses for your regional manager or even your owner. So it's important to not only be aware of our own deadlines, but be respectful and attentive of the deadlines of others. so that if we're giving them information at the last minute that they're having to very quickly compile and move on to someone else, it's not fair to them. So we want to make sure that when we're paying attention to those deadlines, we know what's happening with the information and the material after it leaves our hands, and we're cognizant of the deadlines of others. In episode 1, I spoke a little bit about chunking, and this is something that's going to be super effective for assistant managers, especially since a lot of times you're dealing with numbers, but then you also have to turn around and deal with scheduling. So you want to do things like placing orders, running errands, and even making your bank run, all in one time frame period, because those use the same type of mental capacity. And I suggest that you do those things after lunch, provided that your management company allows it. Because after lunch you have that kind of lull, you might be a little sluggish, so it's helpful if you can kind of re-energize yourself by doing some activity. Another reason that I suggest making those or placing those orders after lunchtime is because inevitably, whenever my staff would give me an order to complete and I would call it in, then after lunch somebody would have remembered something else that needed to be added to that list, and I'd have to call back and make that addition. So I typically like to make my orders after lunch to give them plenty of time to really think about what they submitted to me and ensure that they didn't need anything extra. Now, of course, if you're looking for something to be delivered the very next day or it's an emergency item, getting those orders in first thing in the morning is key to getting them there the next day. And finally, as an assistant manager, part of your role might be assisting in planning and coordinating the make-ready events. This is something that I suggest you do towards the end of the day so that you can have a better idea of what tasks and work was completed during the day, and now you know where we need to go next. If you try to do it first thing in the morning, a lot of times you end up having to reschedule or cancel things because after an apartment is walked, we find that there was an issue and something needs to be readdressed. But if you wait until later in the day, you've given yourself and your management team the opportunity to walk the apartments, to ensure that they're ready for the next step, and then you can go through that planning process. It's a great way to wrap up the day, and it's a task that uses a little bit of a different type of thinking than when you're running numbers and dealing with the mathematics side of the assistant manager role. So there you have it. As an assistant manager, your guide to organizing your day. Number 1, make sure you have that checklist defined with timelines. Make sure you wrap up those loose ends from the day before so you can start your day right. Then you'll want to make your follow-up calls so that you have time not only in the morning, but then again in the afternoon for anyone you couldn't make a connection with. And then you'll want to start with those items that have the deadlines and pay attention and be sensitive to the deadlines of others. Finally, you're going to place your orders and do your planning and all of that in the afternoon when you don't necessarily need so much brain power, but you also need that surge of energy that you get from kind of coordinating and making things happen. Join me next week as we talk about how to organize the manager's day. And then the next week, we'll talk about your maintenance team. That's right, I've got 2 more Thirsty Thursdays full of organizational tips for your team. So be sure to like, share, and recommend my YouTube channel so that you, your team, and your multifamily friends can all get organized.